My daughter didn't invite me to her wedding, then asked for my beach house, so I am Joel, 57 years old, a contractor who built my business from nothing. I raised my daughter Caitlin alone after my wife died when she was 7. We were once inseparable, but everything changed after she went to college and met her wealthy fiancé, James. Last month, I discovered something that shattered my heart. I was scrolling through social media when I saw pictures of her wedding. A wedding I was never invited to. If you are watching from somewhere your family has taken you for granted, hit subscribe and let me know where you are from. This story might just help you find your strength again. I grew up in a small town outside of Portland, working construction jobs since I was 16. My father was also in construction, and he taught me everything I knew about building things that last. I was not a stellar student, but I understood the value of hard work. After high school, while my friends went to college, I started working full-time, learning every aspect of the trade. By 23, I had saved enough to put a down payment on my first fixer-upper house. I spent nights and weekends renovating it while working my regular construction job during the day. 6 months later, I sold it for nearly double what I paid. That was the beginning of my contracting business. I would buy rundown properties, fix them up, sell them, and reinvest the profits. It was at an open house for one of my renovated properties that I met Amanda. She was a real estate agent, smart and beautiful, with long auburn hair and the kindest eyes I had ever seen. She was interested in listing some of my properties, but I was more interested in asking her to dinner. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant, where we talked until the owner politely asked us to leave at closing time. 3 months later, we were engaged, and 6 months after that, we were married in a simple ceremony on the beach. We were young and in love, but also practical. We both worked hard saving for our future. When Amanda became pregnant 2 years later, it was the happiest day of my life. I will never forget the moment Caitlin was born. The nurse placed her in my arms, and this tiny human looked up at me with eyes that seemed to understand everything. In that moment, I promised I would give her the world. The early years were wonderful but challenging. Amanda balanced her real estate career with motherhood, while I continued to grow my contracting business. We were not wealthy, but we were comfortable and, most importantly, happy. Caitlin was a bright, curious child who loved to follow me around my workshop, asking questions about every tool. By the time she was 5, she could name every type of screwdriver and knew the difference between Phillips and flathead. Our favorite weekend activity was going to Silver Beach, about an hour from our home. Caitlin loved the water, and it was there that I taught her to swim. She would splash around, laughing, as the waves gently rolled in. On one of those beach days, she pointed to a beautiful house overlooking the ocean and said, "Daddy, I want to live there someday." That night, we started what became known as the beach house jar. Any spare change or extra dollars went into that jar. Caitlin would proudly add her allowance money, and I would match whatever she put in. It became our shared dream, something we would accomplish together. When Caitlin was 7, our world collapsed. Amanda started having headaches that would not go away. After weeks of doctors and tests, we received the devastating diagnosis: aggressive brain cancer. The prognosis was grim. 6 months, maybe a year with treatment. Amanda fought hard, enduring surgeries and chemotherapy that ravaged her body, but never her spirit. She made me promise to take care of Caitlin and to make sure she knew how much her mother loved her. 8 months after diagnosis, Amanda slipped away peacefully with us by her side. The following years were the hardest of my life. I had to be both mother and father to a grieving child while dealing with my own grief. I had to keep the business running because it was our only source of income. There were nights I would sit at the kitchen table after Caitlin went to bed, bills spread out before me, wondering how I would make it all work. But for Caitlin, I put on a brave face. I never missed a parent-teacher conference or a school play. I learned to braid hair and shop for clothes. I baked cupcakes for class parties and built science fair projects. We kept adding to the beach house jar, a symbol that life would go on, and dreams could still come true. As Caitlin entered middle school, she began to excel academically. Her teachers suggested advanced classes, and I encouraged her every step of the way. I was not an educated man, but I recognized the importance of education. I wanted her to have opportunities I never had. To pay for tutors and extracurricular activities, I took on additional projects, often working 7 days a week. There were times when exhaustion would overwhelm me, but seeing Caitlin thrive made every extra hour worth it. She was turning into an incredible young woman, intelligent and kind, with her mother's auburn hair and my determination. By high school, Caitlin was at the top of her class. She joined debate club and student government. College was no longer just a possibility, but an expectation. We spent evenings researching universities and scholarship opportunities. The beach house jar continued to grow, but we both agreed that college came first. Throughout these years, our bond remained strong. Every Sunday was our special day. No matter how busy work got, I kept Sundays sacred. We would go to our favorite beach, have picnics, and talk about everything and nothing. It was during one of these beach days when Caitlin was 16 that she shared her dream of having her wedding at a beach house someday. "When I get married," she said, watching the waves, "I want it to be at a place like this, with the sound of the ocean and the sand between my toes." I squeezed her hand and made another promise to myself. Somehow, some way, I would make that happen for her. I increased my contributions to our beach house jar, often adding money when she was not looking. This dream had become as important to me as it was to her. The day Caitlin received her acceptance letter to Westmore University with a full academic scholarship was one of my proudest moments. All her hard work, all the late-night study sessions, all the sacrifices had paid off. That night we celebrated with a special dinner, and I gave her a necklace that had belonged to her mother. Amanda would have been so proud. As I helped Caitlin pack for college, I felt both immense pride and a twinge of sadness. Our small home would feel much emptier without her laughter filling the rooms. But I knew this was just the beginning of an exciting new chapter for her. What I did not know was that it would also mark the beginning of a painful chapter in our relationship. The day I dropped Caitlin off at Westmore University was bittersweet. The campus was impressive with its ivy-covered buildings and manicured lawns. It screamed old money and prestige, a world far removed from our modest life. As we unloaded her belongings, I noticed other parents arriving in luxury cars dressed in designer clothes. I suddenly felt self-conscious in my worn jeans and work boots. Caitlin seemed to notice too. For the first time, I saw her looking at me with something that felt like embarrassment. When she introduced me to her roommate and her parents, she quickly added, "My dad owns his own business," as if she needed to justify my presence among these wealthy people. That night, driving home alone to an empty house, I brushed off the feeling. College was an adjustment for everyone. Things would normalize once she settled in. During her freshman year, Caitlin called regularly. She was thriving academically, but also changing in subtle ways. Her vocabulary expanded to include words I sometimes had to look up later. Her tastes became more refined. When she came home for Christmas, she brought fancy cheese and wine instead of the chips and soda we used to enjoy together. "You have to try this, Dad," she said, presenting a cheese that cost more than I would ever spend on dairy. "This is what civilized people eat." The word civilized hung in the air between us. Had our life together been uncivilized, by sophomore year, the calls became less frequent. When we did speak, she talked about parties at country clubs and spring breaks in Europe with her new friends. These were experiences I could never provide, places I had never been. During one of her brief visits home, I proudly showed her the beach house jar, now supplemented with my retirement account. "We are getting closer, Katie," I said, using my old nickname for her. She glanced at the jar with a distracted smile. "That is nice, Dad. But honestly, at this point, we would need to save for decades to afford anything decent near the water." Her dismissal of our shared dreams stung, but I did not let it show. I simply doubled my efforts, taking on larger contracting jobs and cutting personal expenses to the bone. It was during her junior year that Caitlin met James Whitfield. He was a fourth-generation Westmore student whose family had a wing of the business school named after them. From the few photos she shared, he looked exactly as I imagined. Perfect hair, perfect teeth, perfectly pressed clothes. "You will love him, Dad," she gushed during a rare phone call. "He is so sophisticated and worldly." 3 months into their relationship, Caitlin brought James home during spring break. I spent days preparing, cleaning the house thoroughly, and even buying new furniture for the living room. I wanted to make a good impression. James arrived wearing loafers that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. His handshake was firm, but his smile did not reach his eyes as he glanced around our modest home. "So you are in construction?" he asked during dinner. "I own a contracting business," I corrected gently. "Started it from scratch 25 years ago." "Fascinating," he replied in a tone that suggested it was anything but. "My father always says there is dignity in all forms of labor." I noticed Caitlin shifting uncomfortably in her seat. Later, when James went to take a call, she whispered, "Dad, please do not talk about work so much. James is interested in international finance and politics." That weekend set the tone for what was to come. Caitlin began visiting less frequently. When she did come home, it was usually without James, who apparently always had internships or family obligations. During her senior year, I was finally invited to meet James's family at their estate outside Boston. It was an intimidating place with manicured gardens and staff who referred to me as Sir while looking through me. James's father, Richard Whitfield, asked pointed questions about my business, nodding with what seemed like approval, but felt like assessment. His mother, Elizabeth, was polite but distant, discussing art and literature that I knew nothing about. At dinner served by uniformed staff, I accidentally used the wrong fork for my salad. Elizabeth noticed immediately and discreetly signaled to the server to bring a replacement. Caitlin saw this exchange and looked mortified. Under the table, she kicked my foot and gave me a look that said, "Please do not embarrass me." I had never felt more out of place. This was my daughter's world now, and I did not belong in it. The following Thanksgiving was particularly painful. Caitlin came home alone, bringing expensive wine and gourmet ingredients to upgrade our traditional meal. As I was telling a story about a difficult client, she interrupted to correct my grammar. "Dad, it is he and I, not him and me," she said with an exasperated sigh. I fell silent, the rest of my story forgotten. Later, I overheard her on the phone with James laughing about something her uncultured father had said. The words cut deep, but I swallowed my hurt. I told myself she was just trying to fit into James's world, that it was a phase she would outgrow. Despite the growing distance, I continued saving for our beach house. It had evolved from our shared dream to my personal mission, a way to prove my worth, perhaps. By the time Caitlin graduated college, I had saved enough for a down payment on a modest but charming beach house about 2 hours from our hometown. The day after her graduation ceremony, which I attended alone, sitting far from the Whitfields. In their reserved section, I drove Caitlin to see the house. I had purchased it a month earlier, but kept it a secret, imagining her delight when she saw our dream realized. The house was not fancy by Whitfield standards, but it had character and an unobstructed view of the ocean. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, an open kitchen and living area, and most importantly, a large deck facing the water. I had spent weeks fixing it up, painting, repairing, making it perfect. As we pulled up to the house, I could hardly contain my excitement. "Whose place is this?" Caitlin asked, looking confused. "Ours," I said, handing her the key. "I finally did it, Katie. I bought us a beach house." I expected tears of joy, a hug, some acknowledgement of this moment we had dreamed about since she was a child. Instead, she looked at the key in her hand with a strange expression. "You bought a beach house with what money?" "Our beach house jar plus my retirement savings," I explained. "Come on, let me show you around." She followed me through the house with a polite but detached interest, nodding, as I pointed out features I thought she would love. When we reached the deck overlooking the ocean, I waited for the magic of the moment to hit her. "It is cute," she finally said in the same tone one might use to describe a child's drawing. "But Dad, was this really the best use of your retirement money? And it is so far from everything." In that moment, I realized our dream had never been hers, at least not anymore. It had remained frozen in time for me, a promise to a little girl who no longer existed. The Caitlin standing before me saw the house not as a fulfillment of a childhood dream, but as an embarrassing reminder of her simpler past. Still, I held on to hope that the house might become a place for us to reconnect, to rebuild what we had lost. I imagined holiday gatherings, summer barbecues, maybe even someday her wedding by the water, as she once dreamed. How naive I was. The text message came on a Tuesday morning while I was at a job site. A simple notification that would mark the beginning of the end of my illusions. "James proposed last night," I said yes. No phone call. No details about how it happened. Just 12 words that changed everything. I called immediately, but the call went to voicemail. I left a congratulatory message, my voice artificially bright as I spoke to her recording. She texted back hours later, "Thanks, so excited, we'll call soon with details." That call never came. Instead, over the following weeks, information trickled in through brief texts and occasional social media posts. The engagement ring was enormous, a family heirloom from the Whitfield collection. The wedding would be the following spring, giving them time to plan what was clearly going to be an extravagant affair. I tried to insert myself appropriately, asking if I could help with anything, suggesting venues offering to contribute financially, though my resources were limited compared to the Whitfields. My texts were met with vague responses. "Thanks, but we have it handled. The planner is taking care of everything. The Whitfields have connections with all the best vendors." Still, I remained optimistic. This was my only daughter's wedding. Surely I would be involved in some capacity. I pictured myself walking her down the aisle, giving a heartfelt speech at the reception, sharing a father-daughter dance. I went shopping for a new suit, something nicer than anything I had ever owned. I sent Caitlin photos asking for her approval. She never responded to those messages. One evening, as I was scrolling through Facebook, I saw photos posted by one of Caitlin's college friends. An engagement party at the Whitfield estate. There was Caitlin in a beautiful dress, James in a tailored suit surrounded by elegantly dressed guests, raising champagne glasses. A celebration I knew nothing about. I stared at those photos for hours, zooming in on my daughter's smiling face, searching for some explanation in her expression. Had she forgotten to invite me? Was the invitation lost? Or was I deliberately excluded? I called her the next day, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. "I saw pictures of your engagement party," I said, when she answered, sounding rushed. "Oh, that," she replied dismissively. "It was just a small thing James's parents threw together. Family and close friends." Family. The word echoed in my mind. I was her family, her only family, yet I had not been included. "I would have loved to be there," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "To toast your happiness." "It was really just Whitfield connections, Dad. You would have been bored. Anyway, I have to run. James and I are meeting with potential wedding venues today." Over the next few months, this pattern continued. I would reach out about wedding plans, and Caitlin would provide minimal information, always with the implication that everything was under control and my input was unnecessary. When I directly asked about my role in the ceremony, she became evasive. "We are keeping it small and intimate," she said, a phrase she repeated often, though her social media suggested otherwise. "But I am your father," I said during one particularly frustrating call. "I want to be there for you to walk you down the aisle." "We will talk about all that later," she replied. "Nothing is finalized yet." But weeks passed and that conversation never happened. I left voicemails that went unreturned. I sent texts that received one-word responses or none at all. I watched as more wedding-related events unfolded on social media events I learned about only after they occurred. Then came the day I will never forget. It was a Saturday morning. I was at the beach house fixing a loose railing on the deck when my phone pinged with a social media notification. One of James's cousins had tagged Caitlin in a post. Curious, I opened the app. What I saw stopped my heart. Wedding photos. Dozens of them. My daughter in a spectacular white gown, James in a tuxedo, surrounded by what looked like hundreds of guests at an elaborately decorated ceremony at the Whitfield estate. My hands trembled so badly, I dropped my phone. I picked it up and scrolled through image after image, each one a fresh wound. Caitlin being walked down the aisle by Richard Whitfield. Caitlin and James exchanging vows under a flower-covered arch. The first dance, the cake cutting the bouquet toss. A complete wedding already happened without me. I was not just excluded from participating, I was not even invited to attend. My own daughter had gotten married without telling me. I sat on the deck steps, hammer still in my hand, and wept like I had not done since Amanda died. The pain was physical, a crushing weight on my chest that made it difficult to breathe. I had lost her. Somehow, without fully realizing it, I had lost my little girl. The days that followed were a blur of pain, unlike anything I had experienced before. I called Caitlin repeatedly, but each call went straight to voicemail. I left messages ranging from confused to hurt to angry, finally settling on a simple plea. "Please call me back. I just want to understand." When she did not respond, I turned to social media, sending private messages that showed as read but remained unanswered. I considered driving to the Whitfield estate but feared being turned away at the gate, adding humiliation to my already overwhelming pain. I found more wedding photos online. It had indeed been a lavish affair, nothing like the small, intimate ceremony Caitlin had described. I saw pictures of at least 200 guests dining at elegantly decorated tables. There were ice sculptures and a string quartet, fireworks and a designer cake. James's father had given a toast based on the photos of him standing with a microphone, guests raising glasses in response. The most painful image was one of Caitlin dancing with Richard Whitfield, her new father-in-law. They were both smiling, her head resting on his shoulder in a gesture of affection and trust. It should have been me in that photo. It was my place, my role, my moment that had been stolen. I printed that photo and placed it on my kitchen table, staring at it as if it might eventually reveal some answer. What had I done to deserve this level of rejection? Where had I gone so wrong as a father? I called Mike my best friend since high school, the one person who had been there through all my struggles as a single father. "I do not understand," I told him, voice breaking. "I gave her everything I had. I worked my fingers to the bone to give her opportunities. I never missed a school event. I was there for every skinned knee, every nightmare, every triumph. Mike listened patiently, offering no easy platitudes, just the solid presence of someone who knew my history, who had witnessed my dedication as a father. "Have you considered," he finally said, "that this may not be about anything you did wrong? That maybe this is about her trying to fit into a world that she thinks requires her to distance herself from her past?" "By pretending I do not exist?" I asked bitterly. "By creating a narrative that fits with who she thinks she needs to be now?" Mike replied. "It is not right, Joel. It is cruel and ungrateful. But I do not think this is about you failing as a father. This is about her failing as a daughter." His words provided little comfort, but gave me something to consider. Perhaps Mike was right. Perhaps Caitlin had decided that her blue-collar father did not fit into her new life among the social elite. Perhaps I represented a past she was eager to leave behind. The physical symptoms of grief manifested in ways I had not experienced since losing Amanda. I could not eat losing 10 pounds in a week. Sleep became elusive, and when it did come, it was plagued by dreams of Caitlin as a child reaching for me, then suddenly turning away. I went through the motions at work, but my focus was shattered. Twice I made measuring errors that cost time and materials. After a week of this, I made a conscious decision to stop calling her. She knew how to reach me if she wanted to. Continuing to chase after her was only deepening my pain and destroying my self-respect. I needed to focus on my own healing, however impossible that seemed. I threw myself into work, taking on more projects than was reasonable. I spent evenings at the beach house restoring and improving it, not because I still held on to the dream of family gatherings there, but because physical labor was the only thing that quieted the constant replay of painful thoughts. One evening, as I sat alone on the deck watching the sunset, my phone rang. Caitlin's name appeared on the screen. My heart raced as I answered. "Dad." Her voice sounded carefree, almost cheerful. "How are you?" No acknowledgement of ignored calls, no mention of the wedding, just a casual greeting, as if we had spoken yesterday. "I am alive," I replied, unable to manufacture enthusiasm. "Great. The honeymoon was amazing. The Maldives are absolutely magical this time of year. The water is so clear you can see straight to the bottom." She continued chattering about luxury resorts and private beaches, underwater restaurants, and butler service. I remained silent, waiting for some recognition of what had happened, some explanation for my exclusion from the most important day of her life. It never came. Instead, after several minutes of honeymoon highlights, she arrived at the real purpose of her call. "So, Dad, the reason I am calling is that James and I are planning a small post-wedding celebration with some of his family's business associates who could not make it to the ceremony. It is only about 30 people." I waited, unsure where this was going. "We were thinking it would be nice to have it at a beach setting, something casual but exclusive. And then I remembered your little beach house." My little beach house. The dream home I had sacrificed everything to provide, reduced to a convenient venue. "We would need it for a week," she continued, not noticing my silence. "The Whitfields really want somewhere exclusive, where they will not be bothered by tourists or locals. James's dad has some important clients he wants to impress." I found my voice. "You want to use my beach house for a party with the Whitfields?" "Yes. Would not that be perfect? It would finally be useful. I mean, you hardly use it anyway, right? And this way it would actually serve a purpose." Each word was a fresh cut. Useful. Finally. As if my ownership of it was wasteful. "It would be the last week of August," she continued. "We will bring in proper catering and staff, of course. Maybe rent some better furniture for the event." Better furniture. because what I had carefully selected was clearly inadequate. The house has 3 bedrooms, right? James's parents would take the master, obviously. His aunt and uncle could take the 2nd bedroom, and maybe we could convert your office into a proper guest room for the week. She continued making plans for my home, as if it were already decided, as if I had already agreed, as if I had no say in the matter. Finally, I interrupted her. Caitlin, why was I not invited to your wedding? A moment of silence, then, oh, Dad, we have been over this. It was a small ceremony. 200 people is not small, I said quietly. Another pause. You saw the photos. On social media. That is how I discovered my only daughter got married. Through Instagram posts by strangers. Look. Her tone changed, becoming defensive. We wanted the day to be perfect, okay? James's family has a certain standard for these things. There were important people there, business connections, family friends. We needed everything to be seamless. And I would have made it not seamless. I said the truth finally emerging. She sighed, the sound of someone dealing with an unreasonable child. You know that is not what I meant. What did you mean then? I meant that it was a sophisticated event. The kind of event you are not accustomed to. There would have been certain expectations, certain protocols. I was just trying to spare you from feeling out of place. There it was. The confirmation of my worst fears. I was an embarrassment to her, a social liability. I see, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. And now you want to use my beach house? Well, yes. I thought you would be happy to help. After all, it is not like you are using it much. I took a deep breath. I will need to think about it. What is there to think about? She asked, sounding genuinely confused. It is just sitting there empty. I will let you know, I said firmly. I need some time. Fine, she replied, clearly annoyed. But we need to know soon. The Whitfields are already making arrangements with the caterers. After we hung up, I sat on the deck for hours watching the waves and contemplating how my relationship with my daughter had deteriorated to this point. She had excluded me from her wedding, one of the most significant moments of her life, because I did not fit the image she wanted to project. And now she wanted to use my home not because she valued what it represented, but because it was convenient for impressing her new family's social circle. The pain was still there, but something else was emerging alongside it. A sense of clarity. And with that clarity came the first inklings of a decision that would change everything. The weekend after Caitlin's call, I went to the beach house alone. I needed space to think, to process the magnitude of what had happened, and decide how to move forward. As I unlocked the door, memories flooded in. Purchasing this house had been the culmination of years of dreaming and saving a promise kept to a little girl who no longer existed. I walked through each room, touching the furniture I had carefully selected, the walls I had painted myself. Every corner of this place represented sacrifice and love. The deck overlooking the ocean was where I had imagined watching sunsets with Caitlin and her family someday, where I had pictured her wedding might take place. Now those dreams felt foolish, childish even. I had been clinging to a version of my daughter that had been replaced by someone I barely recognized. Someone who saw me as an embarrassment, a reminder of humble beginnings best forgotten. I spent the day walking along the shore, the rhythmic sound of waves providing a backdrop for my turbulent thoughts. The beach was relatively empty, just a few families with young children, building sandcastles and collecting shells. I watched a father teaching his daughter to fly a kite, her laughter carrying on the breeze, and felt a fresh wave of grief for what I had lost. In the evening, I sat on my deck with a cup of coffee watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, A voice called out from the neighboring deck. "Beautiful evening is not it." I turned to see my neighbor Susan, a retired therapist I had spoken with a few times since buying the house. She was in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes that missed nothing. "It is," I agreed. She studied me for a moment. "You look like you are carrying the weight of the world tonight. Want to talk about it?" I surprised myself by saying yes. Over the next hour, I told her everything, the words pouring out like water from a broken dam. The years of sacrifice, the growing distance, the wedding exclusion, and finally, the request to use the beach house. Susan listened without interruption, nodding occasionally, her expression compassionate. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You know," she finally said, "in my practice, I saw this pattern often. Parents who give everything, who center their entire identity around their children, sometimes inadvertently create an unhealthy dynamic." "Are you saying this is my fault?" I asked, defensive. "I am saying that relationships are complex, and patterns get established early. From what you have described, you have spent most of your life saying yes to Caitlin, putting her needs above your own, sacrificing, without expectation of gratitude or reciprocation." "That is what parents do," I insisted. "To an extent, yes. But healthy relationships require boundaries and mutual respect. When was the last time you said no to Caitlin about something important?" I thought about it and realized I could not remember ever denying her anything significant. Even when money was tight, I found ways to give her what she wanted, working extra hours, cutting my own expenses. "Saying no does not mean you do not love her," Susan continued gently. "It means you respect yourself enough to establish boundaries. It means you are teaching her that relationships involve give and take, not just take." Her words resonated with something deep inside me. Had I enabled Caitlin's behavior by never requiring anything in return for my sacrifices? Had my unconditional giving taught her that I was someone to be used rather than respected? "What would you do?" I asked Susan. "About the beach house?" She smiled. "I cannot answer that for you. But I would suggest making your decision based on what would be healthiest for both of you in the long run, not what would temporarily smooth things over or avoid conflict." That night I barely slept, Susan's words echoing in my mind. I realized that for too long my entire identity had been wrapped up in being Caitlin's dad. I had defined my worth through her accomplishments, her happiness, her approval. Somewhere along the way, I had forgotten how to be Joel, a man with his own value independent of his role as a father. By morning, I had clarity. This was not just about the beach house. This was about establishing a new foundation for my relationship with Caitlin, one built on mutual respect rather than one-sided sacrifice. It was about teaching her that love does not mean allowing yourself to be used or disrespected. Most importantly, it was about reclaiming my own sense of dignity and self-worth. I spent Sunday preparing for what would undoubtedly be a difficult conversation. I wrote down my key points, not wanting emotion to cloud my message. I practiced what I would say, keeping my tone firm but compassionate. This was not about punishment or revenge. It was about truth and necessary boundaries. Monday morning, I called Caitlin and asked to meet in person. She seemed surprised but agreed to coffee that afternoon at a cafe halfway between my home and the Whitfields' estate. As I drove to meet her, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in years, perhaps for the first time ever, I was approaching my daughter not from a place of need or desperation to maintain our connection at any cost, but from a place of self-respect and clear boundaries. Whatever happened next would change our relationship forever. But it needed to change, for both our sakes. The cafe was a trendy place with exposed brick walls and overpriced coffee. I arrived early, selecting a table in the corner where we could talk privately. Caitlin arrived 15 minutes late, dressed immaculately, in designer clothes, her hair and makeup perfect. She looked every inch the Whitfield daughter-in-law. "Sorry I am late," she said, air-kissing my cheek. "Traffic was a nightmare." I noticed she did not really look at me, already glancing at her phone as she sat down. The server approached and Caitlin ordered a complicated coffee drink without looking up from her screen. I ordered plain black coffee. "So," she said after the server left, finally putting her phone down, "have you thought about the beach house? The Whitfields are really counting on this. James's father mentioned it to several important clients already." No greeting. No "how are you?" Just straight to her request. I studied my daughter's face, trying to reconcile this polished, entitled woman with the little girl who once added her allowance money to our beach house jar. "I have thought about it," I said calmly. "But first, I would like to talk about the wedding." She sighed dramatically. "Dad, not this again. I told you we kept it small." 200 guests is not small, Caitlin. Fine, it was not small. But it was family and close friends and important business connections. People who matter to our future. The casual cruelty of those words hung in the air between us. People who matter. Implying I did not. "I am your father," I said quietly. "I raised you alone after your mother died. I worked double shifts so you could have dance lessons and SAT prep courses. I never missed a parent-teacher conference or a school play. I put you through college. I was there for every moment of your life for 18 years. And you did not think I mattered enough to be at your wedding." For the first time, Caitlin looked uncomfortable. "It is not that simple." "Explain it to me then. Help me understand." "You would not have fit in," she blurted out, then immediately looked regretful. "I mean, it was a very sophisticated event. The Whitfields have a certain social standing. There were senators there, CEOs, people who run in important circles. You would have felt out of place." "Or perhaps you would have felt out of place with me there," I suggested. "Perhaps I was a reminder of where you came from, a past you would rather forget." "That is not fair," she protested, but her eyes slid away from mine. "What is not fair is discovering your only child got married through social media," I replied. "What is not fair is seeing Richard Whitfield walking you down the aisle in a role that should have been mine. What is not fair is being erased from your life because I do not fit the image you want to project." Our drinks arrived, creating a momentary pause in the conversation. Caitlin stirred her elaborate coffee, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of our talk. "Look, what is done," she finally said. "I cannot change the past, but I am trying to include you now. That is why I thought of your beach house for this gathering. It is a way for you to be part of our new life. By providing a venue that is how you see my role in your life now, as someone useful for what I can provide." "You are twisting my words," she said defensively. "I thought you would be happy to help. After all, you bought that house for me, did not you? You always said it was our dream." "It was our dream," I acknowledged. "But dreams change. People change. You have made it very clear that you have moved beyond the life we shared, beyond the values I raised you with. And that is your right. But it is also my right to reassess our relationship based on your choices." She narrowed her eyes. "What does that mean?" I took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth, the turning point from which there would be no return. "It means I will not be lending you the beach house for your event." She blinked in surprise, clearly not expecting this response. "But why you never use it? It is just sitting there empty most of the time." "Because I have made other plans for it," I said calmly. I have decided to donate the house to a program that provides beach vacations to underprivileged children who have never seen the ocean. Caitlin's mouth fell open. You are giving away our beach house. You cannot do that. It is not our beach house, Caitlin. It is my beach house, purchased with my money, with my sacrifices. But the beach house jar, she protested. We saved for it together. You promised it would be mine someday. The money you contributed as a child amounted to less than 1% of the purchase price, I said gently. And that girl, the one who was excited to put her allowance in a jar, who dreamed of building sandcastles with her own children someday, who wanted her wedding by the water, that girl is gone. You have made that very clear. Her face flushed with anger. This is about punishing me for the wedding, is not it. You are just being petty and vindictive. I shook my head. No, this is about me finally recognizing that I deserve respect. That love without respect is not really love at all. It is about me establishing boundaries that should have been established long ago. So you are choosing a bunch of random children over your own daughter? Her voice rose, drawing glances from nearby tables. I am choosing to do something meaningful with a property that represents years of my hard work, I corrected. And I am choosing to stop enabling behavior that has become increasingly self-centered and entitled. I cannot believe you are doing this, she hissed, tears forming in her eyes. What am I supposed to tell the Whitfields? The truth might be refreshing, I suggested. That your father, who you did not consider important enough to invite to your wedding, has declined to lend you his vacation home. She stood up abruptly. You are going to regret this. When you are old and alone, you will wish you had made different choices. I looked up at my beautiful, angry daughter and felt a mixture of sadness and surprising peace. I already regret many things, Caitlin. I regret not teaching you that respect is as important as love. I regret allowing you to believe that my value was only in what I could provide. But this decision is not one I will regret. Fine, she snapped, gathering her purse. Keep your stupid beach house. Give it to strangers. See if I care. As she turned to leave, I called after her softly. I will always be your father, Caitlin. I will always love you. But from now on, that love comes with the expectation of basic respect and consideration. When you are ready to have that kind of relationship, I will be here. She did not respond, stalking out of the cafe without looking back. I sat there for a long time after she left, drinking my cooling coffee, feeling a complex mix of emotions. There was pain, certainly, but also a strange sense of liberation. For the first time in years, perhaps for the first time ever, I had stood up for my own dignity. I had established a boundary based on self-respect rather than fear of losing my daughter's affection. As I drove home, I realized that while I had lost something precious today, I had also reclaimed something equally valuable, my sense of self-worth. The next several months were quiet. Caitlin did not call or text. I saw through social media that the Whitfields held their event at an exclusive beachfront resort instead. I moved forward with my plan to donate the beach house, connecting with a local charity that arranged vacations for children from low-income families who had never seen the ocean. The first time I welcomed a group of children to the house was one of the most meaningful experiences of my life. Watching their faces as they saw the ocean for the first time, their excitement as they built sandcastles and splashed in the waves, filled a hole in my heart I had not realized was there. I began volunteering regularly with the program, finding purpose and joy in sharing this special place with children who appreciated it in the pure, uncomplicated way Caitlin once had. 6 months after our confrontation at the cafe, I received a letter. Not a text or an email, but an actual handwritten letter on expensive stationery. Caitlin's handwriting, I opened it with trembling hands. "Dear Dad," it began. "I have written this letter a dozen times in my head, never finding the right words. I am still not sure these are the right ones, but I need to try. I am sorry. Those words feel inadequate for the pain I have caused you, but they are the only place I know to start." The letter continued for several pages. She wrote about the shame she had developed about her humble beginnings as she entered Westmore's elite world, about her desperate desire to fit in with the Whitfields, about the gradual way she had convinced herself that distancing herself from her past was necessary for her future. She wrote about regret and realization, about the emptiness of the life she had thought she wanted. "James and I are separating," she wrote toward the end. "It turns out, the Whitfield world is not what I thought it was. Behind the perfect facade are people who are empty inside, who measure everyone and everything by status and appearance. I became someone I do not recognize or like very much. Someone who could exclude her own father from her wedding. Someone who could ask to use his beach house after such a betrayal as if he owed it to her. I am ashamed of who I became." She ended with a request to meet a chance to begin rebuilding our relationship if I was willing. "I do not expect forgiveness right away," she wrote. "I know I have to earn back your trust. But I miss my dad. I miss who I was when I was your daughter. If you are willing to give me another chance, I would like to try to find my way back to being someone worthy of being your child." I read the letter several times, emotions washing over me in waves. There was hurt still, yes, but also hope. A fragile, cautious hope. I called her the next day and agreed to meet. Our first reunion was awkward but honest. Gone was the polished Whitfield daughter-in-law, replaced by someone who looked more like the Caitlin I remembered. We talked for hours at the same cafe where we had last parted, this time, with genuine communication rather than accusations. She told me about the cracks that had appeared in her marriage almost immediately after the wedding. How James's family had begun critiquing her mannerisms, her speech patterns, subtly reminding her that she was not truly one of them. How she had tried desperately to erase any trace of her background, only to realize she was erasing herself in the process. How the emptiness had grown until she could no longer ignore it. "I kept thinking about what you said," she admitted. "About love requiring respect. I realized no one in my new life really respected me. They tolerated me because of James, but they never accepted me. And worse, I stopped respecting myself." It was the beginning of a new phase in our relationship. Not an instant restoration of what was lost, but the slow, careful construction of something new. Something potentially stronger, because it was built on honesty and mutual respect rather than obligation and one-sided sacrifice. Over the following months, Caitlin began volunteering with me at the Beach House program. Her divorce from James proceeded amicably but swiftly. She moved into a modest apartment and returned to graduate school, pursuing a degree in education rather than the business path the Whitfields had pushed her toward. One evening, as we sat on the deck of the beach house after a day of hosting children from the program, Caitlin turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" I asked. "For loving me enough to say no. For not giving up on me even when I gave up on you. For showing me what real dignity looks like." I reached over and took her hand, feeling the full circle of our journey. "That is what real love is, Katie," I said, using her childhood nickname for the first time in years. "It is not just giving everything without conditions. Sometimes it is standing firm when it would be easier to give in. Sometimes it is believing in someone's better self even when they cannot see it themselves." She squeezed my hand, and we watched the sunset together, in comfortable silence. Our relationship would never be what it was when she was a child. Too much had happened. Too many words said and unsaid. But perhaps it could be something equally valuable, a relationship between two adults who chose to love and respect each other, who had weathered a storm and emerged stronger for it. As for me, I had found a new sense of purpose and self-worth that was not dependent on being needed. I had learned that dignity sometimes requires difficult choices, that boundaries are an essential part of healthy love, and that forgiveness does not mean forgetting, but choosing to build something new on the ashes of what was lost. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice for your own dignity, even when it meant potentially losing someone you love? Has standing up for yourself ever led to unexpected healing in your relationships? Share your experiences in the comments below.